Welcome to Born to be Barefoot. I'm your host, Stuart Gordon, with my co-host, Katie Suyuki. Here we go with our latest Barefoot, Born to be Barefoot podcast. And we're delighted to invite back and welcome back a guest from earlier in the season, who's a chiropractor and a bodyworking therapist.
I'm a physical therapist.
A physical therapist. Beg your pardon. I thought you were a chiropractor.
I'm a doctor of physical therapy, but that's okay. A lot of people think that because I do manipulation, not adjustment.
Not adjustments, manipulation.
Yeah.
So this gentleman's called Erson Religioso, who joined us a few months ago, and we had a fascinating discussion about some of the tricks of the trade that he's developed over the years. And we touched on his revelations with using the insoles of our sponsors, Barefoot Science. And you had quite a funny experience with that, didn't you? So what would be great, so first of all, welcome back. Katie, my co-host, is here as always, from down under in New Zealand.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good. So, Erson, anything exciting happened to you? Let's just kick on with a really exciting news thing. Anything exciting happened to you or with you in your business or your life since we last spoke to you?
Well, I'm going to be an ambassador for a company called Curve Health, which is basically they want to revolutionize telehealth for not only PTs, but chiropractors or anyone who kind of uses virtual coaching. So it's really just kind of slick app. So I'm kind of excited to launch that. That's going to be launching soon. My live seminars have been, after the lockdowns, everything started opening up, everything I'm teaching live, and I taught in California for the first time. So that was really nice, beautiful. Quite a flight back to the West Coast, though. I mean, until I started having like a teaching career, I never understood what it was like to be the away team. And now I understand, that's the novelty of travel wears off very quickly when you're the one traveling and they expect you to bring your A game all the time. And then you go home and your wife expects you to help her take care of all the kids like you hadn't just worked the whole time, like you were on vacation,
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
How long a flight across the States for that is you?
Well, I don't remember there's no direct flights anymore, but man, on the way home from California, it was like a 5.5 hour flight and rather long. And also because I flew to Boston first and then back to Buffalo, I passed by Buffalo and then went back to Buffalo.
Wow.
Because apparently that's cheaper than a direct flight. I don't know how the logic of airlines or anything, but it's always cheaper to have one or two more stops. Yeah.
Yeah. How does the climate change people feel about that, eh?
I know, right? Well, all the people who tell it, they all have private jets anyway, right? That's the thing. They always meet in like Dubai and all their private jets, and they talk about what's best for all of us, but they're all like billionaires with private jets.
They're not talking about Erson, who has to fly one extra flight just to get to LA when he's
I know. I just want to get to LA. I don't have to fly to like Utah first or whatever,
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah, you should try coming from New Zealand.
I bet. I know. I've done international. I feel like I'm done with international now, unless it's just Canada, the hat of the United States, as one of my Canadian students called it, although they said toque, because that's what they would call it in Canada.
Yeah. That's true. Erson, you were saying something for a normie person like me. Okay, you're saying the difference between a body worker and a physical therapist and chiro, as Stuart was introducing you. But you said, the difference between manipulation and adjustment, what does that mean? What does it feel like for a patient, or what does it feel like for you?
Because
not everyone knows that. No difference. Okay. Sweet.
Yes, for a patient, no difference. For our professions, in particular, physical therapists and physiotherapists, because chiropractors, at least in many states in the US, I don't know what it's like all over the world, but they are very proprietary about their treatment, which they call adjustment. Especially because I had to study the history of manual therapy when I was going for my doctorate. So you learn about all the different types of body workers and, lay bone setters and massage therapists and, that literally no one owns what chiropractors call adjustments because they think they own it. They've tried to introduce legislation that limits us from what we call manipulation. We purely call it manipulation because we don't do adjustments, because it's almost like you have to have a chiropractic degree and a license to do adjustment. Even if the technique is exactly the same, we can't call it adjustment any more than like when they do ultrasound and electric stimulation, for some reason they call it physical therapy. Like that's all a physical therapist does. I mean, I would say a lot of bad physical therapists or maybe physical therapists who don't know any better, that may be their primary treatments. But, that's just like beating a hunk of meat. And there's nothing active about, you don't change anyone's behaviors by heating or icing or ultrasounding or electric stimulation, right? But they call that physical therapy. So we've had to like even counter that too, because it's not like that's all that we do, right? Is these passive modalities. So there's just always been like this infighting in these professions, just legislatively. It's like a turf war. I mean, but what I always say is the best PTs, chiros, athletic trainers, massage therapists, osteopaths, chiropractors, whatever, we all practice the same. And there's just enough patients for us to go around. Like, because the ones who are at the top of their game do practice very similarly. It's just that we can't help but the politics and the infighting of the professions, and everyone just thinks that like some physical therapists and some chiros think that they are the one-stop shop and no one needs to see anyone else, versus like you can't be the best if I'm a PT just because I have nutrition training and training and exercise and I also do hands-on doesn't mean like you don't need a chiropractor, massage therapist, nutritionist, or even a primary care, because some of us are in primary care too. Like there's literally differentiations and specializations that everyone needs to be respectful of.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So if I'm going to, one of these physical therapists, body workers, and they're just hooking me up to a TENS machine, or they're just wanding my ankle, then that's a red flag. Find someone new. Yeah.
Well, I mean, ultimately, I don't care. What I say is I don't care what the treatment is, because I often get asked online. I mentor so many people online, especially on social media. Someone will just say like, hey, I've done cupping and e-stim and acupuncture, which is like, or dry needling, which is like a less Eastern philosophy version of acupuncture. And I've done instrument-assisted soft tissue work, and I've adjusted their ankles, or I've manipulated their ankles, and I've done all this stuff. Essentially, they're like throwing the kitchen sink at this patient's calf because they happen to have like an Achilles tendon issue, or they have Achilles tendon pain. And what I always say is, I don't care what your treatments are. I only care what you taught the patient. Because no matter what, all you've done with any of these treatments is give a temporary window where you've improved their pain and movement thresholds. But how is the patient going to reinforce that? What education have you given them? Right? Because all of these treatments have temporary effects.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest deal. I don't really care about the treatment. I only care about what have you changed? What have you educated the patient about? What behaviors have you changed that are also leading up to this? Is it also not better because you're doing all this stuff and they feel better and then they're still running like, 100 miles a week, but really it's a volume problem too. Plus they're eating terrible food and they're sleeping like 4 hours a night. You know what I mean? So his research basically shows that athletes who sleep less than 8 hours tend to have recurrent injuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point. Now, for our listeners who didn't get to listen to our podcast with you before, give a real quick, short background on Erson. Is you are like the eclectic master of all forms.
My brand is the eclectic. I call it the eclectic approach. Yeah, I mean,
that's right, the eclectic approach.
Yeah, in my 24-year career, if you didn't listen to me before, you don't follow me on social media, which I'm sure most of you do not. I went from just wanting to learn Actually, first I wanted to become a chiropractor, but my parents are MDs, and they're like, "We're going to disown you if you become a chiropractor." Nothing against chiropractors out there, but like MDs tend not to like chiropractors. So I thought, well, how as a physical therapist can I learn manual therapy or spinal manipulation? So, I specialized in that. I found this school, University of St. Augustine, was one of the first to offer doctor of physical therapy and specialization with manual therapy. And then I found that, I was able to help other people, but I couldn't help everyone. So I basically just went through, I learned from every guru I possibly could in physical therapy, all the big names of our professions to learn like what, I got all their certifications. I went through all their courses. I probably did I estimate 70 courses in the first 5 years of my career or so. And I thought, well, this is a lot of disparate kind of very differing information, because all these, what I call now commercial-based models, are like, if you do it our way, you're going to get everyone better, but don't do it anyone else's way. And I thought, well, how can all these people be successful? Right. And it just turns out anything potentially has the chance to work with the right person. You do the right thing at the right person at the right time. It has a potential to work, but everything also has a potential, a lesser chance to fail. So everyone's quest to take more, other than being mandated to take education to keep your license, which is required in most professions, most people want to do it because they failed or they couldn't help someone that they really wanted to be able to help. So I thought, oh, well, after manual therapy, now I'm going to learn about nerve mobilizations. Now I'm going to learn about soft tissue. Now I'm going to not even learn about manual therapy anymore. I'm going to learn more about traditional strength training. Now I'm going to learn about nutrition. Now I'm going to learn about mindfulness. Now I'm going to learn about breathing. And, eventually my routes took me to like all over the place because I stopped doing traditional physical therapy, even though I'm a physical therapist. That comprises what I call the eclectic approach. I do a little bit of what works from all these amazing systems that I learned from, but I also stripped away all the minutia and I tried to make it as simple as possible, because often simplicity works, even though we think, many people, especially clinicians, we're drawn to complexity. And we think, well, this system's so complex and it has like 5,000 rules. Therefore, there must be something to it. And then you get back on Monday, you're like, well, what do I do now? So the problem is you can't transfer as an expert at anything. Research basically shows that the experts in any field, what expertise really is pattern recognition. And I can't really teach like all the crazy algorithms and all the gears that go on in my head, but what I teach in my seminars is just, if someone presents with this, chances are they have this, this, and this. And if you address these several things, they're probably going to get better regardless of what treatment you use. So I teach pattern recognition because that's the easiest way for me to teach clinicians how to make people better. And that's why I don't see as many patients, and why my goal is to really not to help do you either help 10 or do you help 10,000? I want to help the 10,000 by helping 10 physical therapists treat those 1,000 patients with easier techniques by, again, stripping away all the minutia.
I like that.
Very good. So one of the things when we were chatting, it was very generalized and we covered all of these different areas, which was great. I think it'd be quite good fun. Maybe we could hone in. What we found with this podcast, Born to be Barefoot podcast, is we've had some fantastic endurance coaches and runners on, and we've got quite a lot of listeners who are into the running side of things, Erson. So is this an area where you found, there are patterns, if you like, that you've hooked in on with runners that have come to see you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love treating runners because I don't even know if I mentioned it before, other than the funny story I had about wearing the insoles, that I didn't even think I was just wearing them because I just thought I should before I went on the podcast, but I didn't even think they would work. Right. I just happened to be symptomatic and they cleared up my symptoms. So that was great. But yeah, I mean, one of the biggest patterns, and I alluded to it earlier, and it's a big trend on social media. People ask, do you even train recovery? So many people who have issues, many times it is a volume thing. And the thing with running is that it's the sport that has the highest amount of repetition and the least amount of movement variability, So in my teenage years, I was actually morbidly obese. And even as I was a kid, I was rather large, and it's funny, my mom being a pediatrician, I always tell these seemingly horrible stories. I think they're kind of funny now. It's pretty traumatic as a kid. My friends would be over for and she would serve them cookies and she would give me carrots,
Your mom.
I cried what's that? Yeah, my mom. She was a pediatrician,
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. That's it wasn't great for my ego, but I always thought well, maybe someday I'll actually get in shape, but you actually have to put the work in instead of just wishing for it, right? So in my 20s, I started running and lifting, first lifting and then running. And when you're younger and everything, you can kind of get away with having sloppy form or not having the best mobility, and things don't add up as fast. And after running, I've always been a sprinter, even when I was a larger youth. I've always had a lot of fast twitch fibers and been very fast. I just never had any endurance. But once I built up the endurance, I kind of still use my same sprinting technique, which is huge bounding strides. People would always say oh, I know when Erson's in the gym because it sounds like someone's slapping the treadmill with two sledgehammers. It was sounded like boom, 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 boom. I could only do that for so long, and eventually I ended up with knee pain. And at the time I tried all these other, manual therapy techniques before I actually tried and knew anything else about running. I was just foam rolling my IT band and doing all this stuff. And it temporarily helped. Then I had to stop running for a couple of years. And then, I read like Born to Run, and I changed the way I ran. And at the time, again, I think we alluded to the last time, it's like that during that phase of running, after that book came out, everyone thought that if you forefoot or midfoot strike, it's literally going to solve the world's problems. Like forefoot striking is going to like cure world hunger, and it's going to stop climate change and everything. They acted like it was the solution to everything. And even though it actually helped my knee pain, like someone just said, hey, who's a PT and a chiro, maybe you'll have him on your podcast someday. He's a great guy, Greg Lehman. He just he was trolling me on Twitter. He's like, just because forefoot, but it makes me like a good kind of troll, like a make you think kind of question. I thought he was trolling, but it was really an inquisitive question. He said, well, where do you think all that extra force goes? It's not like the force just automatically gets absorbed into your feet. Just because you changed the amount of stress on your knee by hitting a forefoot strike, what do you think that does to your Achilles? And I'm like, I don't know. It solves every problem, but that was only because it takes pressure off of the knees. The force has still got to go somewhere. So yeah, then I ended up with having because I reduced my heel toe differential so much, like I dropped the heel. For my whole goal is to go from like 12 millimeters to 0 millimeters instead of responsibly over the course of several months. I'm going to do it in like 3 weeks, right? Then I'm like, oh, my knee feels so good. Then I'm like, in 3 weeks, I'm running in Nike Free 0 drop shoes, whatever. I want to run totally barefoot or in Vibrams or something like that. I'm like, oh, now my Achilles hurts. Like now my calves are burning, even though my knee feels better. And I was like, oh, I guess Greg was right. You can't just like eliminate the force. The force just gets distributed everywhere, which. Then I started reading all these running research, and there was a guy who I used to follow, Running Research Junkie. He just posted all kinds of great research and posited all kinds of questions like that really made me think. And it just turns out again that if you add more variability to your run, it's not like any one foot strike. Like if you have calf pain, maybe a heel strike is good for you. If you have knee pain, maybe a forefoot strike is good for you. If you have nothing, maybe you should just vary your strike and not just do too much of one thing. Because too much of one thing will just add up.
Mm.
That's a lot of thinking while you're running, though. Trying to
it is
pinpoint where your foot is landing.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I mean, the best cue, honestly, and I've learned from a lot of great coaches, not just PTs, but just strength coaches or anything, people in Pilates. The best cues are the most minimal cues, because as someone with attention to detail, with a very analytical mind, I used to coach people like they could follow 100 directions, And it's just like,
right.
No one, I think that's every good coach, well-meaning, well-intended coach's mistake is over-coaching.
Yeah.
And the simplest running cue I could give anyone with knee pain or even any lower body problem is run faster, but not even run faster. It's have higher turnover. Because if you have increased turnover, you have shorter strides. If you have shorter strides, there's less ground force, reaction force coming up through your legs, and it tends to really minimize things.
Right. Okay. That's a good tip.
That's a super simple cue,
Yeah.
And I start there.
Right.
I mean, basically
upping your cadence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. By landing, if you're landing with your foot underneath you, then you take away a lot of that impact. If people are overstriding is one of the most common problems, and you're hitting the floor with your heel in front of you, and that load just shears straight back up through the body. So shorten the stride, get your foot landing more or less underneath you, and get that cyclical action. I had a really funny one, Erson, with a really good friend of mine was trying to train to run for the marathon, and he kept getting injured, London Marathon. And so in the end, I assessed him on my gait system, and I had to make the comparison. I said to him, did you ever watch The Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote and cartoons? And he was like, yeah. And I said, okay. So if you looked at them, when they started running, their legs would be spinning in a sort of a circular action. And then gradually the circle would become a slightly elliptical circle going in the direction that they wanted to run in, i.e. forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So his elliptical circle was going up and down. It was an elliptical circle going up and down. So he was like going on like a jack in a box. And consequently, all of his energy was pushing him upwards and not so much energy pushing him forwards. And of course, he was crashing down. His calves were working like mad. His hip flexors were working like mad. Wasn't using his glutes, wasn't using his hamstrings as much as he should do. He kept getting, surprise, kept getting injured. So I ended up taking him out for a run one day and just playing with actions, movements, body position, running with his eyes closed, running backwards, changing things around to get
eyes closed. That's a lot of trust.
Yeah, well, I was holding him behind at the time, running along behind him. But, you got to trust. You need to trust your feet. This is one of the things, we talk about proprioception and the stimulus that the ground contact provides, and that's the foot reading the ground. We haven't had this guy on our podcast yet, but there's a chap called Peter Gorman from Mayor Pack, New York State, who's entrenched in the running world with Olympians and major league sports people of all sorts. And he's developed this gait system. And I interviewed him on a UK podcast. And he was saying, running is man's attempt to fly. He said, so the least time your feet spend on the floor, the better it is. Contact time, reduce contact time. Try and get that contact time symmetrical. He said, but this whole forefoot, midfoot, heel strike thing, he said, yes, in an ideal world, we would, man was designed to run with a midfoot or a forefoot strike if you're going on an endurance run, midfoot predominantly, if you're sprinting forefoot, walking, it's heel and toe. But he said, if you can't land on your fore or midfoot and go forwards, don't do it. If you land on that part of your front part of your foot and then your heel comes all the way back down to the ground and hits the floor and then you push off again, what you've in effect done is doubled your contact time. It's the most, potentially inefficient way to move. You're actually running backwards on the spot almost. So he said, if you can't land forefoot and go forwards, don't do it. Go right. Midfoot or go heel strike. And it was a really interesting point to make. Yes, in an ideal world, forefoot or midfoot running, but we can't all do it. And as you said, as a therapist, the number of people that would come along with Achilles and calf problems who tried to go into a minimal shoe, it was fantastic for business, but it wasn't very good for them. And that's exactly the point. They were landing on their forefoot, going all the way back down, overstretching their Achilles, and then pushing off using their calf muscles and their Achilles to propel them forward again. Yeah. So very inefficient. So it's an interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's okay if you have the mobility. You do have to have the mobility, because what he's essentially saying, not as a PT, what I would think is you don't have the Achilles and the calf mobility, like that, the extensibility, we call it, of the tissue lengthening to be able to land flat, because you're not really landing flat. You're landing like this, and you're going back down. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think
Stuart, I like your road runner comparison too, because also if you notice the road runner, he's always on a lean.
He's leaning forward. Yeah.
When he's running, he's never straight up. He's always like those legs are spinning, and he's got that lean on. Yeah, there's a book that I read.
Scooby-Doo and Shaggy as well. They're the same.
Right. I remember there was a book that I read when I was initially trying all this stuff too. It's like, you want to land underneath you. I don't care so much about landing underneath me now, but whoever I was doing all these drills from, he was saying that, your body's like a gas pedal, and the more you lean forward, the more your feet, like the faster you want to go, the more you're going to lean forward. And that's exactly like the Roadrunner thing, right? Like you're using gravity to your advantage, as opposed to always like launching yourself away from the earth. But I mean, again, there's like another, if I had to cue a couple things beyond cadence, I would cue land softly, and also try to make it so that the world is not bouncing up and down without even telling them how to do it, because they need to be able to absorb that force somewhere in their hips, knees, and or ankles. But if people who are running like this, and they naturally think, oh, you mean the world isn't supposed to be bouncing up and down? And you can easily show them like the video of any Olympic runner. And I'm like, look at these Olympic runners. You could put a ceiling, like 2 millimeters over their head, and they don't hit it. Yeah. For you're going to be bashing your head through the ceiling. But I mean, they have an efficient gait where they are, just running like this, as opposed to
they're running forwards.
Yeah, they're running forwards, not trying to launch themselves off the ground repeatedly.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Yeah. So it's good. So the other area, I don't know whether this is something you've come across, but I see people who, again, are running in that not so efficient way, and they're coming along and say, I've got a real problem with my neck. So is that something you've come across?
Yeah, for sure. I think most people think that runners are basically only have like, leg, Achilles, knee pain, hip pain, potentially back pain, but maybe they even have taken cues where they're going forward. But if your head is too forward, and again, I want to clear up there's the misconception that there's a good and bad posture, because there's no good or bad postures. It's only too much of one thing and not enough of another. Like it just so happens that, that so many people are texting, driving, drawing, whatever. Even before cell phones came out, people were still having head and neck issues. It's just that I think people just sit more now, even more so than ever, with desk jobs and work from home and everything. And everyone's literally on Zoom calls like we are now. But you can see I always try to move around. But when your head is a little bit too forward and your body's rotating, it just strains the neck quite a bit. And I think also the more fatigued you get, like you may just start off a little upright, but then sure, as you start to go faster and faster, it's okay if you're like leaning forward at your feet, but that leaning forward shouldn't be all your head and neck. You're leaning your head and neck, you're taking off a little bit motion here. You're actually putting a little bit more tension on your upper traps. And then plus your trunk is rotating. You're doing this. I mean, just like try to put your head forward like this. If any of you guys are listening, put your head forward, like from your chin forward, like you're a turtle with its head trying to come out of the shell. And then just like swing your arms back and forth as much as possible and see how, then do that like 3,000 times, 5,000 times, like, for the amount of time that you're going to go for a run. Let me know how your neck feels. Right. So yeah, could that cause headaches and neck pain and neck tension? Sure. But and I think a lot of runners actually suffer that, but they don't even think to tell me that they have headaches. It's actually something I ask in history. In anyone's history, actually, if someone comes for knee pain, I ask, well, is there anything else that, you didn't write on your history that I could potentially address? Because they're like, oh yeah, my shoulder hurts or this or that. I'm like, well, I may not be able to look at that today, but I'm going to note that because it is something I could help with. And people just think like they're there, like you're some sort of running specialist, they're there for knee pain, but they don't think that their headaches, which, they think for some reason are normal. Oh, yeah, sure, I get headaches. Like, okay, well, that's like not like it's not something that like you should just have day-to-day life,
Yeah. Well, especially if they're running, look like bumping like the
right.
world.
Yeah, right. The other thing is, they're essentially like they're running and they look like a chicken because like their head isn't ready for it, and then they're launching themselves off the ground like this, and it's a lot of like mini whiplash, I guess, to the head.
Well, it's exactly that, isn't it? Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's simple cues, just like lightly tuck your chin, really. Pretend like an ugly person's coming in to kiss you, lightly tuck your chin. That often just like elevates your,
Makes you want to go run now.
Yeah. The other thing that may make someone lean forward a little bit more is if they lack a little bit of hip extension. A lot of people, they're sitting all day. And it's great, even if you run all day, or if you run, very intensely or work out very intensely once a day. The reason why I'm on a standing desk right now, and if I'm like actually listening to a podcast or I'm watching a video, I literally like run in place like this all the time. Like even when I get gas, I run or walk in place. I try to get like 10 to 15,000 steps before I work out at the end of the day, because I read a study, all these sitting studies. The first initial amazing sitting study followed people who sat more than 4 hours a day. They followed them for over 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah, it was a very longitudinal study. So what they found is that people who sat for more than 4 hours a day tended to die 10 years earlier of any cause mortality. Mm. So, and then when you started to add like 1 or 2 hours on top of that, then they died also faster. So I was like, that's when like several years ago they started saying sitting is the new smoking. Then another study kind of compounded upon that. And this is again me like branching out away from physical therapy and just looking at how to make anyone recover, right? Or just even what's better for me. There was another study that showed that people who work out intensely once a day are less healthy overall than people who just move regularly throughout the day. So I just thought like,
oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, but if you think about it, sure, because what if you are a runner? You run, even you go for a run at 6 a.m. Like a lot of these, like I'm not one of those early birds that goes to the gym. Like I used to work at a gym, and when I would have like this, 6:30 a.m. appointment, there'd always be like 30 people there waiting, like, not even on their phones, because people weren't on their phones 24 years ago, but they were like just sitting there in their car, like just itching to work out. And I'm like, man, these people like just they want to work out at 6:30 in the morning. Like I'm just here because I have to work, not because I want to be here. But if those people just run at 6:30 in the morning, they have a desk job and they sit for like 8 to 10 hours a day, all that sitting is not good for you, even if you worked out once. So that's why I started like just doing, like maybe I'll just start like doing squats in the middle of a call or something. I'm on a Zoom call. Anytime I'm actually on something that's not video, I'll actually just stick my headphones on and I'll just like just march around just because I just want to. The only time we're really supposed to be still is when you're sleeping or dead. So
well, do they have a study on like knee bouncers? Because like I'm a knee bouncer, like whenever I'm like at the family table, if I have to sit down, well, because I'm also like if I'm talking, I want to be like moving, like those people are like, I need to, if I'm on the phone, I gotta be moving. And my mom's always like,
so you're like, you mean like you're one of these, like your heel is doing this? I used to be like that when I was a kid.
Is there any studies on that? Am I doing myself some good at least if I am sitting?
Well, I'd say your knees probably aren't going to be as stiff, but my whole point with this is that people may tend to lean forward if they lack hip extension. Because if you're sitting, even if you work out or run once a day, but you sit the rest of the day, your hips don't really get a chance to go into too much extension. So they may need to lean forward because their hips, like they're actually a little bent at their hips. You know what I mean? Like there's an angle at their hips as opposed to being straight up and leaning at their ankles.
So like the reverse of that, would that mean like you probably also have some glute weaknesses as well? If you're not getting the hip extension, then you have the glute
That's why
weakness?
People have this glute weakness. Why I think things like start off with bridges and then you eventually progress to things like deadlifts and squats, because people really need to work out. Like how often, unless you do a lot of deadlifts and squats, it's very possible that you never really work your glutes and your hamstrings, right? Or even your calves. Or if you, I remember hearing something like, I don't even know, one of my friends told me this. I never read a study on this, but you guys remember Bo Jackson? He's like Bo knows. Right. Yes. Yeah. He's multi-sport, right? Like, he's pro football,
he did baseball, and pro baseball. Football. Did he do golf?
No, I don't think so. Well, I think like later he might have done like charity events or something, but I know he's played at least 2 professional sports. But one of my friends told me that he had all these recurrent hamstring injuries, not only because he probably didn't have enough downtime, right? Like most athletes, even pro athletes have a downtime. They have an off season. He didn't have as much of an off season, but I heard that even in his off season, he was mostly training on the treadmill. You train on the treadmill and the treadmill does all the work of your glutes and your hamstrings for you because you have a belt that's taking you back, right?
Yeah.
So that could be another reason too. Like, even when you train and you're a runner, if you, like me, hate running outside and, I live in Buffalo, New York, it's not, at least running outside when it's cold. I don't run outside when it's cold, but I want to make sure that even if I've done treadmill work, that I put it on a decent incline. I actually walk and I try to like push back a lot. And then I do like, maybe some kettlebell swings or something too, just so it's not, I'm actually working my posterior chain.
Yeah, because that's the point. Running is a posterior chain action, isn't it? We want the power to come from the glutes and the hamstrings, driving us forward, giving us that hip extension, so that we can then stretch and recoil.
Yeah, sure. Stuart, have you ever seen the studies where they looked at like the average Caucasian, like elite runner, and then like a runner from Africa? Have you ever seen those?
I've seen some of them. Yeah. Keep going. But I'll come back to that in a minute. But keep going.
Yeah, keep going because I haven't seen them.
Yeah. Well, I forget like statistically exactly what it was, but essentially, like all these runners from Africa, they're the ones who always win. Like even when an American wins, like the most prestigious marathon, it's usually like someone who actually migrated. They're like an immigrant from Africa who now lives in the U.S. Because it talked about being born to run. But the other thing is that morphologically, Africans tend to have much smaller calves. So when you said that thing about not launching yourself off repeatedly, I'm like, is there something about not only their physiology, but there's something that's just about the way that they run, if they're naturally running forward more than they're running up. Because they must not be like, springing up like that. They're not doing like thousands and thousands of calf raises.
Yeah, the gastrocnemius, the outer calf muscle, isn't so developed, but their soleus, which is hugely important for endurance runners, is massively efficient for that sort of, well, particularly the East Africans and the Moroccans and the Algerians. There was I used to get a magazine years and years ago called Peak Performance. This is about 25, 26 years ago. And there was a very famous former Olympian called Bruce Tulloch, who went on to become one of the first so-called sports scientists. And so this is now, about 27, 28 years ago. He was asked whether he thought there would become a time when Western runners en masse would become as successful as, say, East African and runners en masse. And it was so interesting. His answer was yes.
Oh.
Oh, right. Is this because of sports science advances? Is it because of altitude training? Is it because of new shoe technology or better tracks? And he said, no. They said, well, when do you think it will be? And he said, my estimate is in about 25, 30 years, maybe. And they said, because of all these reasons? And he said, no. He said, because in 25, 30 years, he said, the African runners will also have mobile phones. They'll have cars, they'll have bikes, they'll have other means of transport, and they'll stop running everyday means.
Because they're going to be westernized.
A to B, yeah. So there'll be almost like a down leveling rather than an up leveling. But it was quite an interesting point, because he also went on to say there was a study that was done where African kids growing up would on average run 5K to get to school, to go and see a friend, to go and do whatever. If they were herding the cattle or the goats, it'd be a 5K distance, maybe the water hole, whatever. And they would be running it over uneven ground, and they would be jumping over things and ducking and diving around things and moving multi-directionally at a fast 5K pace. And that was how they grew up running. And then when they went into doing a track event and they were running 5K or 10K, it was an absolute piece of cake for them. It was a doddle. And they were perfectly accustomed to it. And then running in a straight line wasn't a challenge for them, because they were so well prepared proprioceptively and neuromuscularly.
Sure.
So it was really, really interesting. It's a great magazine. I don't know why it stopped, but they came up with some brilliant research and some brilliant training tips and techniques. So,
That's interesting. I thought you were going to say something like, because enough of them will have migrated over here. But let's see if
Mo Salah, one of our greatest British athletes, fantastic, obviously from, I think it was Somalia. He came over as a kid. So the genetics are in there, aren't there?
Yeah, the genetic part of it's genetics as well, for sure. But you got to think about like all the environmental factors, and I think that's very interesting too. I used to have a boss that phenomenal runner, well under 6-minute mile pace. He would run every day to work, and this is when I worked in a gym. He would run over 30 miles to work and just shower when he got there, and then just sit down and do his managerial job. Wow. And the only time he ever injured himself was whenever he ran with slower people. I would always see him after I graduated and everything. He'd tell me repeatedly, and every single time, like, "Oh, what happened to you now, Cameron?" He's like, "Oh, I was running with someone who was slower, and I just used their pace." And it wasn't his form. He wasn't used to that. But he told me the story. He was just he was in Africa visiting, and he just went out for a run. And he saw he ran by this village, and all these people saw this white British guy running. So they were like naturally interested. And he's like, all these Africans, I tried my best to lose them. And these people are just like, they're talking, they're having full on conversations. He's like, at this point, I'm out of breath, and they're all just talking to me like in full sentences, like that treadmill test that like, if you're at like a upper limit of your VO2 max or something, if you can't speak a full sentence, and they're all like, just, "Hey, where are you from?" And he's like just trying to get away from them. He couldn't even lose them.
Just an everyday.
They're just running along. Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, it's an interesting area for sure. I mean, you look at what the Kipchoge and these guys are throwing out with their sub 2 hour things now, and obviously the shoe technology that they've been adding in the carbon fiber stuff. But again, it doesn't matter.
I think to some degree, of course, like we do have better equipment. Athletes have better. I think the thing that also has changed most sports, if you look at something like running or gymnastics or tennis, like over the last 10, 15 years, strength training has really changed most sports. Because previously strength training was like football, basketball, then baseball discovery, and then even NASCAR drivers now they know they need to work out, because literally everyone just needs to be stronger and more fit. But in terms of other things, if I had to tell runners something else you can do to prevent injuries, is you need more muscles. Because if you cross train, not only are you going to have more variability, but your body will also have more ability to absorb force.
Oh, so my old trainer from my snowboarding days. He was like upper echelon, coaching all these Olympians. So he just got picked up by an esports team to go and train all of their like esports gaming people. Like these are like people who are like gaming, and they had got like top level trainer to come in and like coach these guys. They're like, these guys are like making huge money gaming, and you like see their like little gaming world and their consoles and stuff. And like, yeah,
that's funny. That's not, I love video games. So I watch like some esports stuff. And I've never seen anyone who looks like they work out remotely. They might actually.
No, he does. The real John. Oh, what's his Coach Real John or something? I can't remember his handle right now, but he has like this thing of him going in and getting these guys, and these guys like they don't look fit.
Right. Yeah. Like, I mean, that would be like probably the last action. I talked about like all these other sports that actually have physical things. And I'm not saying esports isn't physical, because I guess you could be doing like virtual reality esports. I don't know if that's a thing yet, but most of the time they are just like doing this or like keyboard and mouse, So yeah,
yeah.
Everyone needs strength training. Everyone needs to work out, right? Regardless of what you're.
Oh, well, because they did a bunch of strength training. And they noticed that like the guys could play longer. They made better tactical decisions, like everything brought up, even in esports when they strength trained.
Right, for sure.
So,
I mean,
that's supplemental training.
Yeah, I just shared it on my social media today. Actually, someone just posted all the benefits you get from strength training other than bigger muscles. And
oh yeah,
cognitive awareness and problem solving was one of them. Because literally it's just good to do, and it's not just cardio, because people think cardio only, but strength training really, if you do strength training well, sometimes it is cardio. It's not entirely cardio. Like I know people who only strength train, but like they can't run down the street. So there has to be a balance, which is why I like HIIT workouts so much, because I feel like you get the kind of best of both worlds. But yeah, for sure, it's not just strength training if you want to prevent injuries. Plus, you want to just, I guess, be better at everything. Strength training.
Yeah. So, like these days, Erson, does your workout look like?
Yeah, I mean, other than running, I just do mostly a lot of HIIT workouts. But I in my 20s, I rock climbed a lot, and I found that was an amazing workout because it's like short burst cardio and a lot of like just core balance and, a ton of strength training in a certain specific type of manner. And I just recently joined a rock climbing gym. I took all my girls who were in gymnastics out of gymnastics, and we joined. I always wanted to take them climbing. And so now we all go climbing as a family, and we go climbing several times a week. I'm thinking about, they also started Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So I'm thinking about doing that, but I just turned 48 and none of the guys in the class seem to be my age. And I would go at it like I'm at like
don't 20. Let that stop you.
Well, it's not like it's just running or rock climbing. It's more just like, there's one guy there who was 49, ex-military, bigger than me, just a little bit taller, but like bigger than me. And he's like, yeah, I have to have hernia surgery now. And I was like, maybe it's more like we have a little bit more built up MSK baggage, I would call it, than a 20-year-old. Like I might be able to like spar with them toe to toe for like 5 minutes, but like beyond 5 minutes of like actual grappling, because his problem is like he's ex-military. He was going at it with a 20-year-old for 10 minutes. I said spar for 10 minutes. He's like 5 minutes. I'm like, hey man, can you go a little easier on me? And it turns out this guy's an ex-wrestler plus like 20. He's more than 20 years younger than him. Now he has a hernia. I'm like, I don't know about that. I have a martial arts background. I did lots of martial arts as a kid, even in college and everything. I just showed my kids how to roll properly, like a good martial arts roll and break fall. And one of their mats, I didn't realize, I thought like their gymnastics mats, one of them could absorb a roll. The other one is only for landing your feet. I showed them how to roll once on that one, and one for the feet only one. I felt like I just smacked into the ground and my neck hurt for 2 days. And now I haven't even sparred anyone yet. So I'm like, maybe I shouldn't do this. It's not like I think I'm too old to work out like that. It's just that I think that when faced, I would go at it like I'm 20 and I would pay for it the rest of the week.
Yeah. We just don't bounce as well, Erson.
No, I don't bounce as well as I used to.
That's just like, it's a thing about volume, right? You just need to let your guys know, hey, look, we don't go over 5 minutes. I don't care if we're not sparring over 5 minutes.
Yeah, or I guess I just tap out in 5 minutes. That would be my problem too. It's an ego thing, right? Like, oh yeah, you got me.
Yeah, but they don't even go 5 minutes when they do UFC. No, unless they're I think maybe
the 5 minutes is like
championship round.
Even if I were to tap out, then we would immediately just go back at it again. It's like 10 minutes.
Right.
It's not like the bout is over. If the bout's over, you either switch and you go again, or you just keep on fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting, because it's not a match. It's practice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and also I just do like a lot of HIIT workouts, kettlebell stuff, a lot of body weight. When I travel, I just do a lot of body weight. I used to use blood flow restriction therapy, which I don't even know if we got into that last time, but I mean, that's an amazing modality. If you guys haven't heard of that, it's essentially like working out with blood pressure cuffs on either your arms or your legs. And it turns out that a ton of research, if you guys need to look this up, we can talk about it again in a future podcast, but real quick, if you have partial blood flow restriction, like fancy blood pressure cuffs that don't have like the pump on it, you work out and it makes it harder. Like the perception of burn or fatigue is greatly enhanced with a much less amount of resistance. So people would think like standard overload principle means that in order to hypertrophy muscles, you need to work out with 80% of your 1 rep max, meaning 80% of, like, if you can bench press 100 pounds, you need to work out with 80 pounds in order to, and they thought it was because like you needed to work out with enough intensity to break down muscles. So muscles heal or adapt. Like over time, you break it down because you're using so much load, the body's adapting and building bigger muscles. Well, it turns out that, I don't know how they accidentally discovered this, but when people are working out under partially blood flow restricted conditions, the burn and fatigue came on so much earlier, but with like only 30% 1 rep max. So it's like this win-win, especially at my age. I can work out at much less intensities. There's not much delayed onset muscle soreness because you don't have all the tissue breakdown. Yet there's a dramatic, since the perception of burn and fatigue comes on so much earlier, you get like up to a 300% increase in human growth hormone output. And so you hypertrophy faster than if you were working out traditionally without BFR, blood flow restriction. It's also great for athletes to train who are injured because you can continue training and you can continue building strength, but you don't have to like push your muscles or your system to the limit. Like if a tendon is currently injured, you may not be able to handle 80% 1 rep max. So we say it's supposed to be like, it's not supposed to be the recipe. It's supposed to be spices in the recipe. I now use it as the whole recipe because I'm, again, in my late 40s and I don't want to lift 80% 1 rep max anymore.
But does it feel like, when you have like a blood or a cuff on or whatever,
it's uncomfortable because it's like kind of
pinching.
It's kind of pinching into you. But I mean, honestly, if you like working out, you like a hard workout like I do, it feels like, I mean, when I teach in classes, my favorite thing is to take like the most superhero looking fit person and then have them do like 30. The typical rep scheme is like 30 reps, then 15 reps, then 15 reps, and 15 reps. So 30, 15, 15, 15 with like a super slow body weight squat, just body weight, not, and they're like wiped out after this just because of like the burn is so intense. And usually they'll take it off and all of a sudden like the blood will reperfuse and they feel great, but they're like, oh, my legs are jelly. But then later they feel great. So like you just it's like all the benefits of very difficult strength training without all like the tissue breakdown. So that's like kind of like what my workouts look like. It's a super win-win.
Those compression cuffs, they're localized, are they? It's not like your whole leg. You're not wearing a
no, yeah, just like a pressure cuff, like a 2 or 3 inch width.
Right.
It's not it's not like the compression garments that are used for recovery.
Right.
Interesting. Wow. So do you like you have a home gym or do you show up at the gym with all of these like things and then you're strapping yourself up and people are like,
oh, well, I mean, in my clinic, I have all these things, but I also have it at home too, because I sell these things too. They're like, on my store. How much
are they for
for a set?
Do you sell all 4 together?
I do sell all 4 together. Yep. $269.99. If your listeners want to learn more about it, they can go to edgemobilitysystem.com. I can give you like a 10% off coupon or a 12% off coupon for your listeners.
Oh, there you go, listeners. That's golden. Yeah. Get the new way of working. Are we going to see more?
You can also run with it. You can run with it. You can swim with it.
Yeah, that was my next question.
You can cycle with them.
And to what extent? I mean, would you go out and do a 10 mile run or a 10K run, or would you?
Not at first.
No.
I bet not.
There you go.
You need to be able to come back. That's what I always tell patients too. It's like, yeah, I know you feel really good, but don't go for a run or go walk so far that all of a sudden you need like someone to come pick you up because you realize you went too far.
So there's got to be a progressive.
Yes, there's a progression. Yeah, there's a natural progression because honestly, it will feel like, oh, this is a little difficult. Yeah, the cuff is kind of pinching into me. And then normally 40 body weight squats, if that's no issue for you, when 40 kind of comes around, you're going to be like, man, like their legs are shaking, but they can still do it. That's the crazy part because it's not like an excessive load. Like you're trying, like these 1 rep max, 80% 1 rep max or 100% 1 rep max. It's not like a single thing. You're just doing over and over and over again, pretty light, but the sense of fatigue and burn is amazing.
Where on the leg is the cuff?
The leg, on the leg and on the arm, it's always as high up as possible. No matter what you see on social media, some people like wrap the calves and then they do calf raises. It just for safety purposes, it's always as high up as possible. Because the other interesting thing is, this is what my instructor says, because I'm not the instructor in this. My brand is Modern Manual Therapy. His is Modern Strength Training. He's a PT, but also like an exercise science professor at a university in the US. He says, you can't say human growth hormone, go here. Because what they've done is they've done studies where only the left leg is compressed and they have both legs do knee extensions. Mm-hmm. And the group that has one leg compressed, both their legs still hypertrophy faster than the group that has no legs compressed. Because the human growth hormone is, as long as you're alive and you have a circulatory system, it goes everywhere. It's not just only where it's wrapped. They've also done studies very simple where you wrap the thigh, but then you do calf raises. The calf still grows faster just because, again, especially the same limb, it's going to work a little bit better. But the opposite limb that doesn't need to be wrapped technically doesn't need to be wrapped at all. If you had some sort of disability where it couldn't be wrapped, or you were so atrophied that it couldn't even be wrapped and the cuff wouldn't fit you, it would still grow faster.
That's really, really interesting. I had this conversation just the other day with a client who broke her leg skiing a couple of weeks ago and talking about when to start rehab. And I was saying, years and years ago, I remember seeing a method whereby they say if you worked your right leg that was damaged, if you exercise your left leg, there's about a 10% benefit in the same muscle group in the injured leg. But actually, from what you're saying, if you actually combine the cuff to that, it would increase that, I would have thought.
Right. Well, she still needs to work out. She still needs to work out the other leg. Are you talking about when she's actually in the cast, or after she's immobilized? Or after she's not immobilized anymore?
When she's in the cast, yeah.
Oh, she's still in the cast. I'm not aware of studies like that.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because also it's similar to like mirror box therapy. You get, do you know what mirror box therapy is?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially, like this was developed for stroke patients initially. But imagine if I had a stroke and I couldn't use, this is my left hand. I don't know if it's like reversed on these things. I could tell. So if my left hand had a stroke and I had no use of it, what happens is like these neuro researchers figured out that if you reflect the good hand, like if there was a box, right? Like I stuck my hand in a box and there was a mirror on this side, what happens is this one is now in the box. So I'm looking at the mirror of the reflection of my good side that can move. So if you initially even though I can't move this, I just do this, but I have like the intention. I think I'm going to stick my thumb up. I'm going to put my palms down. I'm going to do an okay sign, even if this hand can't do it, because it's reflecting the hand that can. The brain eventually starts to relearn the motor pathways because it appears the illusion is that the left hand is now doing it. Yeah. So that's and I always say
that's all based off of their perception of what your brain is seeing, not anything else really.
No, I mean, and eventually it works out so that this will eventually move. But yeah, I mean, the brain has two hemispheres and they're actually connected. Unless someone cuts your brain in half, things like that are going to work, where training one side is going to have some carryover to the other side.
That's a really interesting area.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Erson.
No problem. Wow, we really go all over the place with
Yeah. Wow.
And we haven't even been able to ask you about how your experience with the Barefoot Science insoles are.
They're great. You know what? I'm on the very end. And, it's funny because every time it only takes me like a week or so to accommodate to the next pill. I don't know, whatever you call it. What do you call those little inserts?
Plug, insert.
Plug, yeah.
Lozenge.
I'll call them pill. They're not pills, right? I'm not like
why not?
taking a pill.
They look like they're pill shaped.
They are pill shaped.
Like a big
yes,
pill.
they're pill shaped.
Yeah.
But it's like, I almost like the feeling of it. You know what I mean? And then when you accommodate to it, you're like, oh, now I'm at the end. You know, like, oh,
I can't feel it
now?
anymore.
So I was going to build myself. Can I put like 2 pills in here? You know, but I know that's I know that's not.
There's 7 levels. I've been asking where's the 8th level for years now.
yeah. It's going to make my own, just like double it up, glue an extra one on there.
Oh, that's awesome that you're enjoying them. That's great.
No, I like it. I really like it. In fact, when I am in my shoes, if I forget them, or if I always make sure I got to take them out of my dress shoes and put them in my sneakers and take them out of my sneakers and put them in my Crocs or whatever I'm going to wear. And I'm like, if I am in a place where I don't have them, I don't have them. Plus it makes me a little taller, being 5'7".
But the funny, that is a really interesting point. The number of people who I've put into these, and the first thing they say when they stand in them is, "Oh, I feel taller."
No, because literally you are.
Yeah, but there's the pill height addition. It's that engagement of that posterior chain.
Yeah. Oh, you know why also I'm taller is because I did the 3/4 length. I didn't do the full rip the insoles out of your sneaker. And So I did the one where you just add into the shoe. So literally, I'm taller. Because I'm actually adding to the inside of my shoe.
2 millimeters.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I'll take anything that I could get.
That's awesome.
That's great news. Hopefully, is that something you're happy to share with your patients when they come and see you, or whether you're sharing out on talking when your workshops and your
and actually my podcast co-host was having some issues training and everything, and he wanted to definitely try them out. So I don't know if he's purchased them yet, but he thought it was interesting. But yeah, I could easily, if their sponsors wanted to give me just like a sample, or anytime I teach a live seminar, I think that would be that'd be better than me mentioning it on my podcast. My podcast is more for clinicians, as opposed to runners or people with feet. But I think people with feet would benefit from them rather than just clinicians. But clinicians will reach more potentially.
It's like you're helping 10 people or helping 10,000 people. Same.
Right. So, even if I could raffle one off at the end of every one of my live seminars, that would.
Yeah. Well,
we can arrange
get a phone call tomorrow, Erson.
Okay. Yeah.
and Erson, anybody, like you just said that, because in my mind I thought, I need to be a clinician to attend one of your seminars, but anybody can go to your seminars. They're open.
No, that's not true. No.
Oh, okay. Boom.
Yeah. No, but I mean, in the past I've run workshops for how to self-screen and how to prevent injury and stuff. It's just that's my main market is mostly clinicians.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, if you ever host something where you need someone like me or me to teach, injury prevention or anything like that, I'm always down for that, because ultimately I just love teaching. I just love speaking. I love teaching, engaging people. Yeah,
you can definitely tell you're good at it. But anything coming down the line for you? Any big runs or big events or anything?
No, I mean, no, I'm not,
I mean, your life sounds busy anyway.
In terms of runs, again, I used to have an under 6 minute mile with that big pounding gait. The one drawback I would say of increasing your cadence and having it be less harmful on your knees is that you have to work a lot harder. Increasing your cadence significantly also decreases your efficiency. So I could be super lazy and sloppy and be really, really fast, but all my power is doing this instead of doing this, So yeah, now I just run casually for fun, and also just because it's good for me, because I like to prolong my life. But no, I mean, my events are always just teaching seminars and, launching new products here and there.
Nice. And if people want to follow you,
you can follow me. Because even though I post stuff for clinicians, I think I always post stuff like, why don't you try this for back pain? Why don't you try this for neck pain? Or try this for ankle mobility? And, it could help. I always get people thanking me in my YouTube channel. Thanks for posting this. So I'm at Modern Manual Therapy on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Awesome. At Manual Modern Therapy.
Modern Manual.
At Modern Manual. Sorry, that was my dyslexia.
That's fine. Megan will put in the show notes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Great.
I think we should sign off with that statement a minute ago, which to me is perfect. Health, well-being, therapies, exercise for longevity of life. Prolong your life. That's
if you want to live longer, do these things.
Brilliant. Good stuff.
Who doesn't want to do that?
Thank you so much for joining us again. It's really good to catch up. Good to hear how you're going. And as I said,
thank you so much.
I'll see you guys in 6 months.
From Barefoot Science tomorrow. if not over there, it'll be today. Actually, timing wise, it'll be today.
Oh yeah, for sure. Are they in the US?
Canada.
Oh, Canada. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So I'll expect a call. Yeah. I'm waiting for that call.
Megan? Great stuff. Okay. Good night from me.
Good morning from everyone to everyone from New Zealand. And I'm also in the future. It's there's Friday for me. But anyway.
We're ahead of us.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon from Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah. Thank you to all of our listeners. Oh, yeah. Thank you to all of our listeners. If any of you haven't done it yet, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button. We would to hear more great people like Erson that come on with amazing ideas. And thank you, Erson, so much for coming on, and to Barefoot Science for powering this great Born to be Barefoot podcast. Everybody, we're out. You've been listening to the Born to be Barefoot podcast with myself, Kate Tsuyuki, and the wonderful Stuart Gordon. Please remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star review. We'll see you guys next week.